Welcome to Ask the Experts, a web series designed to provide you with practical information on business and finance. I'm your host, Nicole Pride. I cannot tell you how super duper happy I am to have our two guests here today. They are so knowledgeable and inspiring, and they just have great spirits. And I know that you are going to have great takeaways that you can use moving forward. And so, with that, we are talking about owning real estate on an international level. Some of you may have been considering just buying property in the US. Well, you know what? We want you to expand your thinking and get tangible tips today about how to start to look at buying real estate abroad. So, with us today is our two guests, Sheldene Millington and Adanna Davis, who, again, I know will just leave you feeling inspired and informed. Sheldene is a college professor who instructs at institutions in New Jersey and New York. And she is equipped with her MBA, giving information to her students, lecturing on economics, business, entrepreneurship, and financial management. And she has a wealth of information. She has included in her portfolio is more than 16 years at a major financial Wall Street firm. And so she has that information with her that informs her how to move forward, and will give you some tidbits today. She is also an investor in multiple properties here in New Jersey, central New Jersey, but then also, as she will share, abroad, one pending property, but then also some other properties that she'll talk about a little later. Adanna Davis, she is an accomplished, published, and tenured clinical scientist within the pharmaceutical industry. She has more than 20 years of experience, and her most recent role as a head of clinical strategy and operations in oncology. She also teaches as well, using her background to share her knowledge with others at Middlesex County College. And she's teaching in anatomy and physiology. She's taught in biology and bioethics. And she's just a lifelong mentor and tutor in the areas of biological sciences and mathematics. But you may recognize Adanna's name because she is no stranger to the D-Free movement. Adanna has been the chief co-collaborator of the D-Free Foundation's inaugural children's library in Chebby, Ghana, West Africa. Adanna developed a library consortium which includes building and seeding children's libraries across Ghana. So I'm just so super duper delighted to have you two with us today. Welcome, welcome,
Thank
welcome,
you.
welcome.
Thank you so
Such a
much for
pleasure
having
to
us.
be here.
Excited to be here.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the first thing that struck me when I read your bios is just how accomplished you two are in your respective fields, but it has nothing to do with real estate.
That's
So
correct.
I'm just so excited to hear how you've made the leap from your professional world, how you two are just like leading and are quote unquote bosses in your field, right? And so, how did you begin with your interest in real estate? And then maybe Sheldene, you can kick off the conversation.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. My involvement in real estate started from the fact I have three kids, and at a certain point when my daughter was in middle school, I realized that even though I was adequately prepared for college, the cost of college, I realized that I had a few holes in my process. My background is the stock market. So I feel very comfortable in that space, stocks, bonds, mutual funds. And so I had invested very widely for her. And then realized there were some gaps. And I just felt led to move into real estate just so I could fill those gaps so that she would be able to go to college and not have to be constantly focused and worried about the financial aspect of her education. So that's my foray into real estate.
Yes, that college tuition, I speak from firsthand experience, is no joke. And it
Yes,
will definitely have you reevaluate your
exactly. Yes,
finances.
yes, definitely.
And so, Adana, how did you begin your interest in real estate?
I have to say, first of all, thank you for being here. Thank you for having me here. And it's a pleasure to be amongst you all as well as our listening audience.
Oh, thank you.
Um, I'm probably just as surprised as you, quite honestly. I was very focused on my career and, life. And um, as just sharing stories like with family and understanding, our heritage, I learned that, you know, real estate was actually in my DNA. So my maternal grandmother was very active with my maternal grandfather. They were very active early on in real estate and set the pace, I would say, for me in that space. And growing up, they were doing real estate transactions all along the way. And I really did not have any knowledge of it. And I really kind of, as I, just traversed in life and started uh, purchasing, my own personal property and home, then I realized in telling stories, with family and friends and things, learning about our heritage, and I was like, oh, this is in my blood. So, um, I just came about it, I would say naturally, just
Yeah.
organically. Yeah.
I think that's just so interesting that they were so involved in real estate, but it's not like they sat you down and said, "Here, Donna, this is the first step. This is what you do," and you just naturally gravitated to it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's how things happen, I guess, sometimes.
Okay. And so, can you both tell us about the type of properties that you have in the US? Because I take it you started in the US first before you started buying property internationally.
So I'm in, excuse me, central New Jersey, and the properties I currently own are both single families and multifamily.
And so, how did you go about finding those properties? What was that process like?
The process was very, very scary, simply because you don't know what you don't know. And I was not a real estate person. That's not my first inkling or
Mhm.
my first, way of processing. So I thought about it. I knew I had to figure out a way to have a path for my daughter. And I started listening to podcasts, started reading, and looking at YouTube videos, excuse me, just in general, trying to get knowledge. My background, the way my mind works, I'm always looking for something to read, just trying to be very strategic. And so I started listening to Bigger Pockets. It's a forum for real estate newbies and those who are in the real estate space. And just by listening to the podcast, by engaging, I started to get an idea of what I wanted. I found a real estate agent just by asking around, interviewed her just to make sure that we're, in the same mindset, thinking along the same lines. I explained to her what I was looking for. She helped me to find a property. I purchased the property, and then I was like, oh my God. I remember the day of the closing, they gave me the key. I drove to the property, I unlocked the door, and I sat down on the steps going up to the bedrooms. And I was like, oh my God, I bought a property. What do I do? I don't, it never even occurred to me the idea of tenants. And I'm like, I called up the agent.
Oh.
She was like, are you okay? And I'm like, I need a tenant. I don't know what to do. And she was like, yeah, I could help you get a tenant. And I was like, wow. So just going from being a novice, and then like I repaired the property, did the renovations, got the tenant, and a year after I was like, oh, I could do this. I just put a system in place, tenant pays the rent, any repairs have to be done. And just by having a process in place, I was able to buy one property, then buy the second property, buy the third, and I just kept going.
Wow. So, I mean, you said a lot there. So that's the whole journey. So you first just started out with just natural curiosity,
Yes.
maybe I wanted, well, no, actually, you were trying to fulfill a need, right? Because you
Yes. So
initially told
there's
us.
always a why.
Mhm.
Why is whatever the situation is, and then moving from the why to how can I fulfill that need, and then
Right.
what is the process involved?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so for you, that why was you needed more income. Your daughter's
Yeah.
going to college and you wanted to bring in more
Yeah.
income. And you knew that you were pretty much starting at like ground zero, let's
Bar
say,
zero. Bar
uh,
zero.
with
No knowledge.
information,
Zero
no
knowledge.
knowledge,
No.
nothing.
No.
And you just started by consuming information, right?
Yes.
And I think you said Bigger Pockets is the name
Yes,
of the podcast.
biggerpockets.com is a forum for anyone who's interested in real estate, anyone who wants knowledge on how to further their real estate career. And you don't have to be an agent, just people, just
Yeah.
people
Right.
coming together to share knowledge.
So you found a resource because you were thirsty, hungry for the information, and that gave you more knowledge for you to feel comfortable about moving forward a bit. And
Yes.
then fast forward, you purchased your first property, and then reality hit,
Oh
right? And
yeah.
that,
Oh yeah. Terrified. Terrified. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Just taking baby steps, just taking baby steps and figuring it out as you go.
okay.
Yeah.
And so, Adana, what's your story? How did you get started in real estate?
Wow. You know, I think for me it was starting small. Um, it was as Sheldene has described it, it's quite scary when you think about you need money, you need the time, you need to have some level of engagement, and I would say exposure as well. I mean,
Mhm.
having the exposure, being around that with my grandparents. I had a couple of friends who had ventured and done very well in real estate as well.
And so,
And
what did that look like for you in the US? So, you started out in the US 1st.
right. So I purchased like my first condominium, when I was in my early 20s. And that was for my personal, home at the
Hmm.
time. And I did a home buying class, just to learn, okay, what are the components? You need a real estate agent, you need a real estate attorney, you know. Um, uh, so all of those, players, if you will, but just getting that exposure to those people who are experts in those areas and building a team. So I have an A team, and I could call them, Team Adanna. So I have a realtor, I have a real estate attorney, I have another female in, who's well versed in the industry who owns a trust company now. Um, or I'm sorry, a title company. So all of
Hmm.
those components, all of those, and so that was my first kind of exposure to the players of the game, if you will,
Hmm. Hmm.
and to surround myself and glean information and understand and have them walk me through the process initially. Bought the first condo, and that was quite an daunting experience, just preparing myself to get to the table to sign the documents and
Right.
become an owner of a property. I mean, the number of documents you have to sign and understand, like, what am I signing? You feel like you're signing your life away, but you have to take that experience and walk in, each step of that experience to understand what it's like. Because we can share all this information, but until you, um, you know, actually execute on it, and until you actually move forward and walk through it yourself, that's when the manifestation comes. So for me, it was initially a condo here, and I bought multiple single family dwellings for myself, bought them, sold them, and then stepped out into, the real estate, the international real estate space.
Okay, so that's a great segue. And so, what what was the catalyst for you to start real estate outside of the US?
Honestly, as part of the historical stories that we shared as a family, understanding that it was a captivating share, if you will, that my mother was telling me about, my grandmother, literally opening up newspapers and looking in the classified. And I know we have Google and other sources to get this information nowadays, but back in the day, if you will, it was the classifieds in the newspapers, and there were listings. My grandmother would just take a look at listings, and come to find out she had purchased a property literally in Brazil.
Wow.
It's a piece of land, so nothing on it, et cetera. Blind, obviously. She hadn't been to Brazil, so she purchased it, and I didn't. I was like, wow, what must that be like, But that it was an unconscious and unbeknownst to me, that was a catalyst for me. And so
Hmm.
fast forward to 2020, in fact, God sent me to Costa Rica. I'm a world traveler, so I was like, oh, of course I'll go. But we're in the middle of the pandemic, so that was quite daunting. I'm like, you want me to go? And I did not have my real estate glasses or lenses on at the time, so I was not going for that purpose. But
So you were just in Costa Rica for vacation
because God, yeah,
or
God kind of
personal?
told me, yes, yeah,
Yeah.
just personally, okay, go.
Yeah.
And so just being obedient to the call, went. And this is, I actually saw a couple of, advertisement for the first condo that I bought, well, condo or single family dwelling, and in a gated community, and actually passed the second um, property that I ended up purchasing as well. So that was really kind of the catalyst. The seed was planted with my grandmother, and unbeknownst to me, it started to grow and manifested in 2020 when I went to Costa Rica. Um, and you know, the saga continues.
Yeah. So Sheldene, what about you? What inspired you to begin looking outside of the US for real estate?
I was comfortable managing my properties here. A friend of mine was interested in having an Airbnb back in Barbados. I'm Barbadian. And we talked, and she would send me the pictures, and I would look at them, and one thing led to another. My aunt reached out to me, and said, "Are you interested? Here's a property." I saw the property, and then like everything was like, "Oh, you could do this." And
Hmm.
then just having that spark of different people showing me different things, asking questions, just trying to get as much information as possible. It really is what got my attention to think about not just being domestic, but moving internationally and just spreading my wings.
So by the time you started considering property in Barbados, how long had you had your property in the US and how many properties?
It must have been about 5 years. So I felt pretty comfortable managing and taking care of tenants and being a landlord domestically. I must have been doing it for about 5 or 6 years. And then my aunt talked, and my girlfriend was like, here's an opportunity. And I was like, I'm okay. And then I started really looking at it. Once I saw the properties, I got really, really interested,
Caught
and
the
then
bug.
started to, yeah, I caught the bug and then decided. And I didn't even go to see the property. I purchased the property just based on the pictures, and
Hmm.
my aunt being boots on the ground, providing information and getting that feedback for me.
So that's interesting. So you're from Barbados. Had you been traveling back and forth and
No, no, I
Mhm.
hadn't been to Barbados in probably 15 years.
Oh, okay.
So I'm from Barbados, but I live here. So,
Yeah.
you would hear stuff happening. I would go to a few functions. There are Barbadian organizations here in the US and in
Hmm.
New Jersey. I'd go to functions, but I wasn't really paying any attention. to what was happening over there. When you have kids and you're working, there are multiple things to juggle. I wasn't thinking about
Right.
investing in Barbados or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But just the idea of I could do this because at least I have a little knowledge from what happens in the here in the US. I can probably just translate that and get into something over there.
So it was literally your, I think you said friend who started
Yes,
sending you
yes,
listings and said, "Hey, you should
right.
consider this."
Yes, yes. That's how it started.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so both of you now at this point, Adanna, you went to Costa Rica, you fell in love with the country, the culture, you happened to drive by and saw the listings and just started to explore it. So, what was the process like from afar purchasing real estate? And if you can share like the biggest challenges, Adanna, if you can start with that. Mhm.
Sure. So I would say when it dawned on me, like this is actually possible. This is possible. You know, um, I went to the first property, and there was just a natural connection with the HOA president. She showed me a couple of the units in this gated community, and she said, "Oh, you could be my neighbor." And we laughed. I'm laughing like, "Oh yeah, that's seems like a dream, sure." But as things continue to materialize, in terms of speaking to the developer and understanding, what was involved, and I mean, it was a no-brainer. But I have to say, I'm like, this is a whole nother country. I'm like, I have no, I don't have family, I have no rooting there, but I really had to kind of lean on my faith. And I would say just the patience to understand um, what what I didn't know, and
Mhm.
kind of lean on understanding. Okay, the process is different. This is a whole other country. You need to know the laws of the land and need to know people who understand that, who can help to share that with you. And so that was key for me. Just
Mhm.
knowing the HOA president, knowing the developer and the developer's daughter, understanding that it wasn't so easy to obtain a mortgage because I'm not even a citizen or a resident of Costa Rica at that time. And so, um, who is then going to help, me navigate? Because I don't want to get into something that there's no way out, or any of the possibilities that I didn't even know were possible, right?
So what
Um,
type of support did you have?
so each of those, the two people that I named, they were just instrumental. They just jumped right on and helped me because
Okay.
they wanted to see that happen for me.
Mhm.
Um, it was divine, quite honestly. We So I'll give you an example of just one of the things when we were putting together the contract. Literally, it was a couple of pages because it was very limited. They hadn't really done this before. They were kind of new, and they had a couple of properties in the development. There weren't very many at that time, and here
Mhm.
I am, an expat, looking to do this. Costa Rica is a Spanish-speaking country,
Mhm.
but they do speak English. So we were looking for an attorney, a real estate attorney, who could translate, and help us navigate the contract.
Right.
So all of that said, the translator ended up becoming the attorney to help both of us on both sides,
Yes.
and now we're all friends, and that's my real estate attorney.
Mhm.
So those were key players, to say, key elements, key people who kind of helped me walk along and got the ball rolling for me.
Mhm.
So one of the things that the developer shared with me, and I think this is I guess, a gem in terms of going into spaces and places that you might not know what the landscape holds and supports. She did mention to me, even if you don't buy in this development, wherever you might buy, just make sure that they have a water source. So that was
Mhm.
really key for me. Now, that's
Mhm.
not something that we would think of maybe in the United States.
Right.
You build a
Mhm.
home, you have the indoor plumbing, et cetera, et cetera. But if there's no water to source the
Mhm.
property,
Mhm.
then that could be an element. So that could
Mhm.
be a real issue and a real situation.
Right.
But sometimes people being, remote, let's just say, being located in the United States and buying something blindly and not understanding that you can't build on it if it doesn't have a water source, that was a huge piece of information that was key and pivotal for me understanding and navigating not just the initial property, but the future properties.
Right. And yeah, it's just having the local support that you need to be able to guide you through the process. And
Absolutely.
so, Sheldene, what about you? What is the biggest challenge that you had from, being afar, trying to go through the process and, eye-awakening moments you may have had? Yeah.
I feel that the biggest challenge I had was myself. I think
Mm.
living in the US, you get exposure to the way we do things. We're a microwave society. We like to order something and have it come within 24 hours, within 48 hours. We're used to operating at a very quick pace. We're used to
Mhm.
saying something and having it done. You call some person, you get a response. You send an email, somebody responds in 24 hours. We're just used to a certain pace.
Mhm.
And outside of the US, it took me a while to figure out that other countries don't operate the way we do. And so I had to create a mental adjustment and
Mhm.
realize that I can send an email today. It may take a couple of days before I get a response. I
Mhm.
may call a business and they may not pick up the phone by the second ring. And just
Right.
understanding the logistics of a different culture, they do
True.
things very differently.
Yeah.
So I am in the process of purchasing a property in Accra, Ghana, and my real estate agent there reached out to me and said that the sellers over there want to meet me. That never happens in the US. I've bought and
Mhm.
sold properties in the US and never met the seller or the buyer.
Right. Right.
In this country, we are transaction driven.
Mhm.
Mhm.
You get it done, you move on to something else. In another country, in other countries, they want to establish a relationship, they want to get to know you, and it's just a totally different culture. And just understanding that and realizing, yes, I reached out to the lawyer this morning, it's now 24 hours and he hasn't responded, and then I'm following up again, I haven't heard anything, kindly provide an update. And his response is like, well, there's only going to be an update if something goes wrong. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I don't want anything to go wrong. This is why I'm asking for an update.
Yeah.
It just it's just a totally different way of thinking. The thought process is very different. And then another challenge that you have to think about is here in this country, there's certain costs that are like set in stone. In other countries, doesn't work like that. So I could go to NewJersey.gov and set up an LLC in less than 10 minutes and only pay, I think it's like $128 or whatever. In
Mhm.
other countries, to set up a business, and the properties I buy outside of the US, I don't buy them in my name. I purchase them. I set up a company and purchase the properties through the company. So
Mhm.
just that process alone, it's not hundreds of dollars, it's thousands of dollars. So
Mhm. And just to
realizing,
clarify, so it sounds like the company that you're setting up is actually a company of that country.
In that country,
Yeah.
yes. So what I have a particular organization here that I set up. So I buy the properties through my self-directed IRA. So I set up an LLC here that sends the funds to an LLC in that country, and the
Right.
LLC purchases the properties there. So
Got it.
just understanding the flow of the transaction. And in those other countries, they don't recognize some of the laws we have here, and they don't recognize the terminology. So how do you explain it to them, get them to understand, and get them to just go along with the process? And once they agree to go along, then that's an additional cost. So just not just the culture, but there's cost involved, and thinking about how do you manage the cost, because it's so totally different from how we do things here in the US. So
Wow. And so no one walked you through this process.
no.
You just
So
learned this
nobody
along the
walks you
way.
through. So you're flying by your pants, and you're just getting information, thinking about it. There are a couple of websites here, people to talk to, but nobody actually walks you through it. So you're walking through it. And as you're walking through it, you have to make decisions on the fly. And then explain the decision to some person who's in another country who doesn't understand and quite frankly isn't interested. They're just trying to get the transaction done. But in order to get the transaction done, there are processes and procedures that have to be followed. Just that mindset of the culture, the cost, and just thinking about doing business in another country, there are political forces, there are different things going on that you have to be knowledgeable about. And you don't have to have in-depth knowledge, but you need to have sufficient knowledge to decide, is this going to work? And if it isn't going to work, what is my exit strategy?
Well, that's why we're so grateful for the two of you, because you're bringing up things to consider that are probably not even on our radar right now. And so this is really helpful. And especially that whole concept about adjusting your thoughts about time and the concept of time and cultural influences and stuff. I mean, I had just traveled recently and all the restaurants shut down around 2 or 2:30, which was just like different. Right. And so there's things like that you just wouldn't know, or holidays that pop up and you're not aware of, and things shut down. And so that is key, because if this is part of your financial plan and your portfolio, and you're really banking on money coming in during a certain time, if you're thinking, oh, well, this process is like a 4-month process, and I can expect to maybe have tenants in a couple months after that, then you can just really throw you off completely, right?
Exactly. Those are things that you have to think about. And as US citizens, we don't always think about that. The property in Barbados took me 9 months. And here in the US, I've bought and sold properties. I've bought a property closed in 6 weeks, 5 weeks. It's not major. We live in a society where we're just used to things happening.
Right.
Once you get outside of the US, you have to think about what is going on over there. You also have to think about interest rates. So with inflation and everything happening in this country, what is the return on my investment now that we have inflation? And what are the currency exchange rates? So let's assume that I have property over there and I have a tenant. How do I want to be paid for the rent? And what is the currency exchange? Is it worth it for me to have the money come back to the US just because of the currency exchange, or should I keep it there? Just things to think about. And there are challenges, but this conversation is what happens in certain circles all the time. So it's information that's out there. We just have to know how to slice and dice and to maneuver so that we get that return on the investment. And another thing I thought about is here in the US, here in New Jersey, we have certain real estate practices. There's certain things you think about from a real estate perspective that don't necessarily apply in other countries. So we have the 2% rule, and the 2% rule says that um, when you purchase a property, 2% of that should be at least the minimum income you get for rent. So if I purchase a property for $10,000, ideally for $100,000, ideally I want to get at least $2,000 in rent. That's a U.S. Real estate rule for investors. That may not work in another country, and so you have to decide: are you okay with getting 1%? And maybe you can get 2 or 3%, but those are the numbers you have to think about. What is the return on the investment I want? What does the political landscape look like? What is the culture? How is unemployment in that country? And everybody doesn't get into that level of detail. I just like to know.
Now your macroeconomics is coming out.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I have friends who do it and they don't get as detailed as I
Right.
am. But it's just how you wanna slice and dice to make sure that you're getting the return on the investment.
Yeah.
I can tell it's just coming out now.
Yes.
And so, Adanna, um, in terms of the travel, you bought your property in Costa Rica. What type of investment in travel? Did you go back and forth a lot, or were you able to do a lot of your work from remotely to
Yeah.
purchase?
So that's a great question. Because I am a traveler, I enjoyed it. I was like, oh, I can do this. I don't mind going. It's beautiful there.
Yeah.
Um, but that's a factor that probably would not necessarily be considered, or if it is considered, it might be rate limiting in terms of people say, well, I don't want to do that kind of travel. Um, it initially I had to walk in those footsteps to understand because one of the properties and eventually multiple will be part of Airbnb. So me sharing that experience of what it takes or and what it is to be there and actually walk in the steps, let's say, or traverse the landscape that my target, let's say, clients or would walk. I kind of had to do it myself. I didn't know that at the time. So for instance, I, one of the gifts was I now know the flight attendants, so it's a commuter route for me. But Costa Rica, like some other countries, set up different programs to appease more tourism and people coming to actually invest in their countries. And so Costa Rica, for instance, has a digital nomad program where you don't necessarily have to be a resident, but you can stay there for an extended amount of time, whether it's greater than 90 days. And basically work from there. So there would be times where, I wasn't going into the office, and this was during the pandemic. So I would go to Costa Rica. So I was working from home, but home in Costa Rica.
Awesome.
And so they have 5G, so connect right away, total experience, doing. So that was my experience in that sense. And then also as a tourist, understanding, what's around me, what would be attractive to people who would come and be doing short stays or vacations, etc. So that travel could be rate limiting, but I just didn't let that. Yeah, I think you have to have that tenacity and that passion for what it is that you're doing, what you have decided to do. And then the faith that even if it looks fearful or looks insurmountable, just to do it anyway, quite honestly.
Yes.
And so that's just, my approach. And it's really a matter of perspective that has helped me, be as quote unquote successful, and success, looks different to different people. But I think travel was not rate limiting for me in that sense. And it definitely helped that it was in a beautiful space.
So, Adanna, you travel to a different country, like some of us go to the corner store or the pharmacy. So. But it sounds like you two have different models, right? So you are focused on using your property as an Airbnb and to really experience the property and the community, to be able to communicate that and to market and advertise is key. Where Sheldene, you're looking for local folks who already know the community, who already know the areas a little bit more intimately, and maybe not necessarily needing to experience it. Did you do a lot of it from remotely, or did you travel back and forth a lot?
So I didn't travel back and forth. As a matter of fact, I never saw the property before I bought it. I never visited. I didn't go back to Barbados.
Mhm.
I had boots on the ground. I had friends, my aunt. I would ask questions. They would send videos. And just based on that information, I decided to move forward.
Okay.
Same thing with the property in Ghana. I don't travel like Adanna. And so just having boots on the ground in those places, who could be my eyes and ears and sort of bring back reports and tell me what's going on. That's how I've been able to move forward.
And so what does that team look like in terms of for you to be able to manage your properties remotely?
So I feel it's really important, as you mentioned, to have a team around you. So I have a real estate lawyer wherever I want to buy property, simply because I don't know the laws of the land. I get a real estate lawyer. I have a real estate, I have an accountant, I have an agent, I have friends or people who can investigate, people who can ask questions, people who can go to land tax and confirm what the land taxes are. In Barbados and in Ghana, I'm finding out that there are times where the water flow is compromised. There are times where there may not be electricity. So just thinking about how do I manage that? I need some person to check that out. So do I need to have a water tank? Do I need to have a generator? And if I need to have those things, how do I get it there? Is it better to send it or is it better to buy there? Just general, but I think it's really, really important to have a support system. If you can't travel back and forth, you need some type of support system to help you to be able to navigate the process.
And so being that you purchase without going there, so they're literally like with the camera videotaping and talking you through, or what does
Yes,
that look like?
yes. So my friends will go, my aunt would go, and I think it's really important that you have people who understand what it is you're looking for. I want to, because I don't live there, I am very interested in buying property in a gated community. I want the tenant to have some sort of a level of safety. So I want to buy in a gated community. I want to buy in a space where we talk a lot about walkability, where the tenant has access to a doctor, a lawyer, the hospital, just to have those amenities. So once I have a friend or a family member who thinks that way, I can ask them certain critical questions and have them, is there a school nearby? What about the hospital? Here in the US, when you talk to landlords, people say always buy in a town that has a really good university, buying a town that has a branded hospital. Just those general areas. Where's the supermarket? Where the schools? Where the churches? How
Right.
far is the precinct, the police station from the property? Just general things, and I'm able to have people answer those questions and come back to me.
Great. You gave us an awesome checklist. And so let's talk about tenants. So it's interesting that you guys are remote. What is your vetting process to be able to find the tenant that's right for you? Adanna, you want to go with that?
Sure. So I have more of a diverse slate, I would say. So while I do focus on Airbnb and let's say Verbo um, and even local, I would say potential, and I wouldn't say tenants. I would just say short-term stay visitors. So where my property, one of the properties is located, is a tourist spot, and tourists not just for those from visiting from other countries, but also for those who live in Costa Rica. So they're native Costa Ricans who may live more inland and
Right.
want to come closer to the beach, for
Right.
instance. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's the broad and diverse kind of uh, people who would come and stay and be a part of that. Enjoy the property. I also have another property that's a little bit more remote. So for that remote, um, like a small cabin up in closer to let's say the woody area, so a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more remote from the beach. So there could be potential for that. Also, I have looked at, and as part of my team, the HOA president, who it happens to be my neighbor,
Mm-hmm.
she offered her services as a property manager, which she has some background in. So she can help, I would say, scope out or tailor what the advertising description is for select parties who would want certain things. Do you want that kind of touristy feel, closer to the beach,
Mm-hmm.
down from the supermarket? There's a swimming pool on site because it's the development and in the
Mm-hmm.
gated community. Or do you want that kind of more remote, quiet type of stay or extended stay? So um, having a team of people who can support and put together that type of information and make sure that there's a constant flow of people, and being able to tailor what we have to offer by way of advertising to the respective audiences has really helped, um, you know, in the properties that I'm able to offer.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you have two different types of property that expands your opportunity for people to stay there. And then with that model of a Airbnb or Verbo, is that it's there's the ease with that. There's a process with that. And with the rating system too, that helps you identify people who might be appropriate for your property.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I've also, people who say, "Oh, you have a property in, Costa Rica," who are friends or family members. So,
Mhm.
I already know them, they know me. There's
Right.
a level of trust and relationship there. And if they're looking for, a quick trip, a week
Yeah.
or so, I can offer that, as an opportunity for them to stay and,
Perfect. Yeah. And it's
yeah,
nice and clean that way. You go through
absolutely.
you send them the link.
Yep, exactly. That's exactly how we manage.
Yeah. Sheldene, what about you? How did you vet tenants?
The tenants I am primarily interested in are business tenants. Um,
Hmm.
So if your company sent you to Ghana to work for a year, I'm
Right.
interested in you. If
Mhm.
you work for the UN, if you're an expat, I'm interested in you. I am primarily focused on tenants that can bring a high rate of return on interest on my investment. So I am interested in that demographic. So I reach out to real estate agents and have them vet just in that area, just because that's what I am primarily focused on. Most of the properties are in the areas close to businesses. And I want that just so I attract that type of tenant, a tenant
Right.
who has access to his job, he can walk to work, close to hospitals, just in that space.
Now, do you ever work directly with companies to find a tenant or strictly through the real estate agent?
So I have the agent work with companies.
Hmm.
I don't do it myself just because of my hands are full here in the US with the properties and school and all the different things I have
Right.
bubbling. So I'll have the agent in Barbados or Ghana reach out to those businesses. So here's an example. The tenant I have in Barbados has been in Barbados since COVID because Barbados has a visa program. It's called the Welcome Stamp, where anyone in the world can get a special visa, go to Barbados and live. And he's from Ireland and he came to Barbados, got the visa, and he now lives there. So that's the type of tenant that I want to attract. He works there, he works for a US company. He's Irish, he works for a US company, and he lives in Barbados.
I love it.
Totally, totally global, and he pays his rent in USD. Totally, totally global. So that's the type of demographic that I'm looking to attract.
Now, that program sounds similar to what Adanna mentioned in Costa Rica. So I
Correct.
wonder if this is something that's pretty common in other countries since
Yeah,
COVID. That makes the
since COVID,
Mhm.
most developing countries have
Yeah,
had this type of program just as a way to bring in people who don't want to be in developed countries like the US and Canada and the UK, bring them to developing countries to bring the income in because the price for the visa is very different from if you were just coming, to visit. So
right.
it's
Right.
just another way of countries bringing in international dollars.
Right.
Wow,
So
it sounds like the timing is ripe then for
Yes,
international
absolutely.
real estate.
definitely.
Absolutely.
Definitely. It is truly, truly worth it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, what would you say to someone who, so now I'm sure after your feedback and the information that you're giving, that people are a little bit more inspired now to pursue investing in real estate abroad. So, but still maybe feeling a little timid, like maybe you guys are outliers, like this sounds all good and well for you, Sheldene and Adanna, but I don't know. So, what would you say, Adanna, to someone who still has reservations?
Sure. So I would say, uh, and this is just me. I guess this is the adventurous side of me. But I think with anything, it's really a matter of perspective. Like if you have an interest, if you um, just try it. Do it scared. Um, like us, while we didn't know that we had those resources around us, we just took the leap of faith and developed relationships and built an understanding for what it is that we wanted to do.
Mhm.
Um, and as we developed traction along the way, that was encouraging for us. So we
Yeah.
have to start somewhere.
Mhm.
We are resources ourselves. So,
Mhm.
if look around you because you probably are not aware that you have resources right around you and you can ask those questions, etc. So for me, like I have a real estate attorney in Costa Rica but it was someone I met by way of the first property that I was purchasing. She started out as, she was just going to translate the contract for us to make sure
Mhm.
that, filing the contract, it had to be in Spanish.
Mhm.
So I needed some help with some of the legalese, if you will, terms in the contract, although I do speak some Spanish. So I was able to utilize her services, both myself and the developer. But over time, we developed a relationship. And so she's someone who was right there, who came in as a translator, but now is my attorney. And
Right.
so, not knowing that she eventually would be someone who would be a resource. So I would say access your resources, utilize what's in your hand. Oftentimes it may present itself in one form, but you can actually use it in another form. And an
Mhm.
example of that would be, money. You might not have, $10,000 for a down payment, but
Mhm.
if you have your current property, if you have, equity in that, you can refinance and pull money out, and that could be what you need in order to make that investment. So
Right.
I would say go for it. Just go
Mm.
for it. You cannot fail because you will always learn. You will always learn.
Sheldene, what would your advice be for someone that's a little timid about moving forward?
Oh, we live in an environment where there's so much out there. And sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And because you don't know, you don't realize what is around you. Sometimes you hear people say, like, I never thought about a BMW until I bought a BMW. And
Mhm.
now that I have a BMW, everywhere I turn, I see BMWs. It's that same
Mhm.
thought process. So
Mhm.
just get out there and be curious. Just be curious. Ask questions. And by asking questions, you get information. More importantly, ask yourself, why do I want this? You must always have a why. What is your why for doing what you're doing? And then just get out there. So, just by me purchasing property, I am now a part of an international landlords group, and it's all brown girls. It's just
Mm.
all of us, which is, I never thought about it. I didn't know there was such a group. But
Mm.
just by being curious and
Mm.
asking questions and not being afraid to take that step, you have to take that step because things that we are thinking about, there are people who are actually out there doing it and making it happen. So
Mhm.
we have to not just get the information and have analysis paralysis. We just have to get the information and just make moves. Just
Mhm.
make moves, make it happen, execute. That's it.
Excellent. And this group you're talking about, is this a personal network or is this an established organization?
This is an established organization here in Central Jersey. We meet every quarter and just talk about what's going on in an international space around our properties.
What's the name of the group, if you don't mind?
It's just international real estate
Mhm.
landlords.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So I
There.
mean, the information is out there.
Mhm.
We just have to get up and make moves and just join. There's bigger pockets. There are YouTube's videos. So I grew up in the day where we didn't have access to information. You had an encyclopedia that you had to look at. Now we have access. There's so much information out there. We just
Yes.
have to get up and get the information because people are doing it. It's just that we are not aware of what is going on.
Mhm.
That's it.
Thank you. There's just so many themes that were reoccurring in both of your stories. Like one, just exploring the curiosity, right? Just
Mhm.
if you're curious about something, just look into it, read more about it. And then that leads to you taking other steps. Just you guys reinforce, having a team and a network and using folks that are within your network to help you advance forward. And I'm just so encouraged by this. And I know that those listening are as well. So thank you so much for all of the nuggets. We are going to, I'm sure, I know that people will look at this and take notes and, be inspired to take action. That's what this is all about. So thank you. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much for having us.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Okay. So there you have it, folks. Another episode of Ask the Expert, which is powered by Prudential. We want to acknowledge our wonderful sponsors. Thank you, Prudential. And as always, you have access to free financial planning. At the link below, you'll see that you can go to that link and schedule a time to talk with a certified financial advisor through Prudential. There you go. So we'll see you next week, same time, same place. Bye.